have a relationship with the natural world. I draw specifically upon Jain karmic theory because the multi-sided description of reality that emerges from it, Untitled, cultivates profound empathy. It dispositions one to consider the direct as well as indirect violences related to his or her actions as integral to his or her character and moral being. So I've had a fair amount of exposures to Jain classrooms for Westerners and also for people of Jain faith, and something that's continuously emphasized is having an ecological self-awareness, and I don't think we have that in public schools here. There's no psychological cutoff between who one is and what one does. Currently, individuals in mass numbers are dispositioned to psychologically disengage from global chains of damage that their daily habit patterns and lifestyle choices directly support. And that's a problem, and I attribute it to a problem of our perception and how we interact with one another and with the environment. And again, it's that idea that man is placed over and against his environment, and we don't see ourselves as a simultaneous experience. And so if you're thinking karma, that sounds sort of strange or silly, it's actually not that silly. And a lot of people in the West probably have heard the word, but perhaps don't realize it's actually regarded as fact in many Eastern cultures today. So the closest scientific evidence for it, and I put scientific in quotes because from Untitled, so that multi-sided perspective of reality, it's actually really easy to criticize the one-sided material bias of Western science. So I'll continue. So the first scientific evidence for it is the butterfly effect. It makes us aware that our habitat is shared and our actions affect one another. They have deeper impacts than what is immediately experienced by the individual. The butterfly effect highlights the fact that science is not in the position to predict everything once whatever sufficient information is gathered, owing to the existence of intrinsic limitations. In this respect, it has contributed to the advent of a new post-Newtonian scientific paradigm. I think it's referred to as systems theory or the complexity paradigm. So the second is not directly related to karma, but more so reincarnation. Ian Stevenson, who is a highly respected MD, carried out he did some ethnographic field work on reincarnation, and his methodology was flawless. He investigated so many cases, and if he were studying, so this is my opinion, this is purely my opinion, if he were studying any other phenomena that didn't directly put into question the basis from which we understand reality, I think his work might be more well known. So moving on to education, so what do we learn in public schools? Like, what are the deeper imprints, right? So students learn that authority or truth is external to themselves in the form of an authority figure. They learn to conform socially and intellectually. Uncertainty is correlated with a lack of confidence, and there was one more, but I also don't like public speaking, so it's in mind right now. But my question is, how is that serving us? So how is it serving us in terms of the social and ecological issues that we're facing? I don't think it's helping, and I think Jain education systems offer a really helpful approach. So as part of my studies, or on the side as extracurricular, I began teaching and developing curriculum for a life skills course in January of this year that covered topics ranging from health and wellness to secular morality through the lens of yoga and Jain philosophy and practice. The site is a Youth Build school, and Youth Build is a 501c3 nonprofit helping students between the ages of 16 and 24 who have been kicked out or who dropped out of traditional schools but want to further their education anyway. Much of what prevented these folks from finding success in traditional schools has to do with personal obstacles they were forced to overcome. Poverty, violence in the home, foster care, drug and alcohol exposure at an early age, mental illness in the family, a lack of support system, a lack of positive role models, gang violence, time in the criminal justice system, family members in jail, and a lot more. Those are just for my students. I never explicitly mentioned the term Untitled or Jainism in the class itself because it wouldn't serve the student population. However, we do cultivate awareness around our relationship with others as a starting point for introspection. And so I see that as we're applying Untitled without naming it. We also spend a great deal of time breaking down the moral and ethical practices of yoga, the yamas and niyamas, into thought, action, and speech, which, from my understanding, is a very Jain thing to do. So Jainism is powerful in its ability to uncover subtle violences and layers of meaning where they are not explicitly apparent. In my reflection about working with youth-pulled students and staff, I refer to statements and body gestures of the staff that could be interpreted by the students or that might connotate a negative evaluation of student worth as unintentional or subtle violences. So this is why it's really important to engage teachers as well as students in mindfulness discussions and practices so that they themselves can uncover how they might unintentionally commit harm to their students based on their past trauma and their past experiences. If students don't feel emotionally safe, then they put up these emotional barriers that block them off. It's a process of othering themselves intellectually and emotionally. So I realized that while yoga and meditation for the individual is really helpful in terms of coping with daily anxiety, stress, depression, and other mental health issues, if the goal is to actually plant seeds at youth builds for long-lasting change, then it's necessary to address the mental and emotional health of the teachers and the case managers. It needs to be addressed in tandem. And because if they're to effectively facilitate healing and growth, then it's paramount that they have experiential knowledge of what that process entails. And so I guess beyond that, what are we doing to address larger social and ecological concerns? If we know that yoga practices help the individual, well then how can we apply the philosophy and theory to larger institutions and social bodies where there are systemic problems? And it's a systemic problem of how we see things, our perception of how we exist in relationship to our circumstance. Okay, so how am I doing on time on that? Okay, cool. So this summer I will travel to co-lead a Teaching for Peace program at the International Summer School for Jain Studies. The 31 participants are educators ranging from kindergarten teachers to university professors. The objective of the program is to utilize Ahimsa, Anikanpad, and Aparigraha, which I haven't mentioned yet, but that's okay. So to help teachers cultivate the ability to recognize qualities of a nonviolent classroom in which space for students to gather self-knowledge through the pursuit of higher knowledge is not only maintained, but prioritized. Participants will be asked to introspect over the ways in which their underlying value systems might unintentionally affect their students. And so there's no foolproof method to prevent that from happening, right? Because ideology, it's always happening and it's always at play. But teachers can become aware of it so that they can understand their role as a facilitator of the learning process rather than an authoritarian figure, and learning for different students looks different, right? So everyone has their own ways of learning. And so, yeah, so to conclude, Jain-based pedagogy is important, and I think it has the potential to help a lot of the problems that we collectively are facing.
A little louder.
I just got back from India, and I was there for 6 weeks, and coming back has been really kind of a hard re-entry because of that awareness of the violence, and that violence that's sort of accepted and taken for granted in this society is just really, really different there. And so I applaud so much what you're doing and sharing, because it feels so necessary and a big next step that we benefit from. So thanks.
Thank you.
Do you think that they'll start to offer programs like the immersion here in the United States where it would be more feasible for more Americans to actually be able to afford to attend and gain that type
one of my dreams, which I can't imagine how I would make happen, is I would like to bring a group of youth-build students that are really smart. They just can't help the circumstance you're going into. Is I want to bring them to the semis in modeling. Like, I want to bring them there because they're so intelligent and they're so powerful. But in terms of bringing more teachers, is that, I don't know. I don't have enough information into that. I feel like Professor Chappell would be the person to ask about that. And it's already happening, right? Through ISSJS, and I guess as it gains more traction, that's the only good things that are happening. And I think people are starting to recognize that there are a lot of problems that do need to be addressed, and I think that is helping make people more open to the idea of it. So, yes.
I was wondering, have you thought of a way to introduce this to the larger organizations in a way that the people who are already in it don't feel like it's just something else they have to do, that they can embrace it? Because sometimes when you present these things, they feel like, oh wow, I have all these things to do, now I have this to do too, in a way where they can get on board and really see the value in it.
It's a really good point. It reminds me about what Toya said, but also what initially Debbie said, you can't get at people's heads, so if people don't want it from their heart, then, and if they don't experience it themselves, I don't know how else. I feel like people trust their experience, and they trust their experiential knowledge, and I think that's really important. And there are a number of ways to facilitate experiential knowledge, but that means one of the seeds or that belief in something different has to already be planted in that institution, because you can't just go there and say, I'm going to teach you something and it's going to change you, because that doesn't work either. So I don't know. Yes.
Because it's an academic setting for the students, it's an academic setting, right? Or the program in general. I'm just wondering,
Which
like,
one?
the youth build.
So, I don't know what it is. We move all the tables to the perimeter of the room, and we go through it week by week, and it also depends on what they want. So they sit on yoga mats, but we sit in a circle, and they're always given, at the beginning of class, a moment to ask any questions they want. Usually, they don't until the end of the school year. That's when they start asking questions.
I think that was my question. So it's in a school setting. Does the school ask that you measure the impact of the program in any way? Because I feel like that's usually expected for, does it have an impact on student success or behavior or something? And it doesn't have to, but I feel like the school usually expects that to give legitimacy to a program. So I'm wondering if that's the case.
Working with the youth build staff and faculty has been really challenging because there's a lot of resistance. In terms of the qualitative data I've gathered, I have journal entries from students who've struggled with anger issues, and they've incorporated pranayama into their life. Like when they want to explode at their significant other, one of my students wrote about walking away instead, breathing, and then coming back and talking to her instead. And it was powerful to read because yoga works, and I feel like I'm just facilitating it. It's powerful, but the staff themselves, they don't have the budget for it, so it's and also, but they also just put in a greenhouse, so they're going to try to grow vegetables and fruits and sell that at the farmer's market, and I think that's a step in the right direction too. So it doesn't have to just be this; it can be through a number of different ways. And maybe if they go to a farmer's market, they'll meet someone there, and so I don't know.
I was just going to suggest that if you're looking for some comparisons in the different types of education in schools, to maybe look at the British system, because they do, anyway, having my kids gone through that system, there's a lot of different training in terms of tolerance and climate change and relationships and religious education that I think is different in the U.S. So just as maybe as another option to look at.
Thanks, guys.